Yo, what's poppin', Low Gang? Today we're going to be doing the final rant of January 2024. Today's rant comes from Redneck, who says, I want you to listen to Puppet Loosely Strung and Foolish Man by the Correspondents, one of JoJo's favorite artists. And like with the Marilyn Manson rant back in October, watch the music video if the song has one. I was really fucking late on this rant. It's currently 9 p.m. On the final day of the month, so I have about 3 hours to get this out by midnight. Luckily, me and Redneck share the same time zone, and so I'm not releasing it in February for him. And it also doesn't help that I'm sickly bagels today. Luckily, I took enough Tylenol that my horrible, constant fucking fever and sneezing has gone away. So I do actually sound kind of okay doing this rant. Lucky me. So, the Correspondents, it's a band. They have a very light, sort of jazzy, dancey sound, as far as I can tell. Obviously, I'm just going off of these two albums, so I don't know anything else they've done, because I haven't listened to them before this moment. But I listened to them, binged them in like 3 hours, because, of course I did. I was running out of time. But, you know what? JoJo, I've talked to JoJo and Redneck, he's his friend. Hey, your taste in music, I don't have to roast it today, because I did enjoy a fair bit of what I listened to. Now, what I like about their music is the sort of light piano jazziness that it has, which is particularly present in the first album in certain songs, like Fear and Delight, which is easily my favorite song that I listened to today. It's fucking great. What I don't necessarily like as much is when they go into a more processed electronic sound, which they don't go super heavily into a lot of the time. You know, you can get a lot worse than this, but I still definitely prefer the more Will Wood-esque sounds at certain parts. And I know that might be a weird comparison. I'm going off of my extremely limited frame of reference by which I listen to music and relate them to other artists that I've heard from, which is very few because I don't listen to much music in general. But I liked it when they sounded more like Will Wood and less electronic-y, even though the little electronic highlights, like when they're done tastefully, I do enjoy them. So, I mean, considering it's 2 albums, I can't really deep dive into all of the songs, but I'll do a few highlights as I look through my notes here. So obviously, Fear and Delight, second song on Puppet Loosely Strung. It is easily my favorite because it's catchy as hell. I could listen to it so many times, and like if I weren't so pressed for time, I'd have looped it 12 times by now, just in a row, because it's such a banger song. It's so catchy, and I didn't listen to the music, or didn't watch the music videos of all the songs because I wanted to have the lyrics in front of me. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just put the lyrics in front of me instead of watching the music video. But for this one, I listened to it twice, once with the lyrics, once with the music video, and I did it as well for, what was it called? I know it's somewhere in here. Yeah, Well Measured Vice. I also saw the music video for that one. The music video for Fear and Delight is of him basically just in this room, and there's like a bunch of different versions of him that they're both weird music videos, as music videos tends to be in order to capture your attention. You know, it's far from generic. So it's just him in a room, as well as occasionally different female actors behind him. He's just walking around this room and ends up cloning himself like 8 times, and it's a very fun watch. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual song, except for the part where the girl is shooting him with a bow and arrow. that kind of weaves its way into the themes, which I guess I should start going into. He talks a lot about sort of toxic relationships. Sometimes they're good relationships and he wants to like save the girl from an abuser, and sometimes it's just pure wholesome happiness. Other times it's this girl is pulling me down, or I cheated on my wife, can't look her in the eyes now. And obviously, at least I got the impression listening to it, not all of these are things that are literally happening in his life. I'm sure that he didn't literally cheat on his wife and is just casually admitting this in song form, especially because the song is about hiding it from his wife, which you wouldn't really do if you're making a song about it. So if I had to hazard a guess, he's playing a character in that specific song. But nonetheless, the prevalence of this theme makes it evident to me, at least, that there is something about just relationships with women in general that he needs to get off his chest. That maybe he has continually tried to find love, but that each time something about it just doesn't end up being all that, just doesn't end up working out. Now, I can't say that I particularly connect to this theme in his music, because I've never really connected to themes of romance and failing relationships, despite in the past having had a relationship that failed because we both had personalities that just brought each other down and made each other worse. And so I should theoretically have a frame of reference in order to understand what he's talking about, and I do understand some of where he's coming from in certain songs. I understand what that's like, but at the same time, it's not something I necessarily connect to. And I guess the reason why is because I just sort of see relationship issues as the default template of music, which I know you can do interesting things with it, and I've seen it done before. But at the same time, it's hard to win me over on that specific theme. But rather, the themes I find interesting in his music are the ones that aren't necessarily being talked about by other artists. So an example of this, as I was just talking about, Well-Measured Vice. I had to look at my notes again to remember the song title. Well-Measured Vice is essentially about the idea that sexuality isn't inherently sinful, that it's just this giant thing perpetuated by religion and the church that doesn't really have bearing in reality. And I like this theme and agree with it, essentially, because although my feelings and thoughts on the topic are complicated and nuanced, the song itself is called Well-Measured Vice, right? It's not saying you should get addicted to sex and sexuality and indulge in it constantly. It is saying that well-measured, it is fine, that it is not inherently sinful, nor does it make you a bad person. And once again, agree with that wholeheartedly, and I'm glad that there's a song relaying my exact thoughts on the subject, where, suppressing this aspect of yourself and treating it as a demon that needs to be expelled isn't going to do you any good. I think this aspect of religion just leads to guilt complexes, or not religion as a whole, but rather specifically Christianity, as far as I know, because that's what's most prevalent in America, and that's what I experienced growing up, where, I was a 13-year-old boy, got a little horny, hated myself for it. Maybe not at the level of self-hatred, but I really didn't like that aspect of myself. I thought I shouldn't be engaging in this. I remember not every week, what the fuck am I talking about? But however often we went to confession, or tried to psych myself up each time. Okay, this time I'm going to admit to the priest that I watch porn, and then I would never do it, and I have to have that on my conscience, that I had lied by omission to my priest, that was all. Eventually, obviously, I stopped going to church, and so I don't really care anymore. And now I just openly admit it online, so I guess that's where my character development has gone. Another song that I related to the lyrics of is Puppet Loosely Strung. The idea behind this song is that the narrator, whoever is singing it, I actually don't remember his name. I had it remembered at some point, but now I've forgotten it. But anyway, has this dude in his life, and he's a bit more loosey-goosey, doesn't really listen to the expectations of others. And he's seen as a failure by those around him. He smokes, he drinks, he just indulges in everything. He, probably, and I'm just getting this from implication, probably doesn't have the best or most respectable job, but the idea that there is such a thing as a respectable and not respectable job in and of itself, in my opinion, is kind of bullshit. Unless your job is to murder people, okay, obvious exceptions are obvious exceptions, but there's nothing okay, think of the idea of the janitor. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I want to get this out there. Imagine a janitor. That's not really a respected job. In fact, it is the punching bag of society, really, like a sewer cleaner or a janitor or, someone who fixes toilets or like a construction worker. That's the poster child of a job that you don't want according to society's expectations. But, that needs to be done. Someone needs to do that. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're stupid to be doing that job, right? I mean, you can, like being a janitor. Maybe that's something you enjoy. Maybe you enjoy treating people at a restaurant or a gas station. Or maybe you're just the wife or husband of someone who has a higher paying job and you just work this less respected and less well-paying job in order to help out the family, make a bit more money. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the idea that any of that is, lesser, or that you should be less proud of yourself for having done it, is bullshit, because any job is a good one, except for murdering people, once again. So where I'm going with this tangent is that it's this idea of breaking free from society's expectations, which are dog shit, by the way. Fuck society. And the imagery of a puppet loosely strung, aka the title of the album. The imagery is essentially someone who has broken free from society, where they still feel the pressures, but just barely. They acknowledge the pressures, but they're able to say, oh yeah, well, what if society's wrong? What if I'm right? What if I'm doing something that is still worth doing? What if my lifestyle isn't nearly as bad as you're making it out to be? And this hits especially deep when literally earlier today I was listening to Digibro's Why is Digibro Still After Dark? Something to that effect. And he was talking, or I guess she now, was talking about how society, basically Digi portrayed this aspect of herself, the full extent of herself, rather, of being a weirdo. And the idea is, I'm not trying to be a role model, I'm just trying to make you understand that this is a type of person that exists, and that you have to understand that there are people like me out there who are on the fringe of society. I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but it just sort of popped into my head that it's a similar-ish idea of basically that society doesn't necessarily have the best intentions for you. This is getting extremely long-winded, so I'm just gonna shut the fuck up and go into the next song. Gonna scroll down. Alright, so we're on to the second album, Foolish Man. Now, the earlier songs of Foolish Man were starting to get me a little worried because they felt a bit overly processed. They didn't have well, first of all, the album as a whole feels a lot more full in its song, in its sound, rather, than Puppet Loosely Strung. Puppet Loosely Strung feels very light, where even the heavier instrumentation somehow feels light and poppy and dancey, and like you just want to groove to it. Foolish Man feels a bit more full in its mixing. And it also feels a bit more processed at times, and that was what I was really disliking near the earlier parts of the album, but it made a very quick turnaround for me with songs like Well, Holding Her Tight, I just liked the lyrics of mostly because it's about adultery. Boss, okay, I'm reading my notes here. Love the instrumental on this one, but not as sure about the chorus or whatnot, but it's fun. And then Freedoms hit. And this one's essentially what I said in my Ocean Oko video in song form. Not necessarily exactly what I said. Obviously, it's done with less depth because it's just a 3-minute song. But, you know, it also goes into the subject more broadly, whereas I speak very specifically about how I connected with that episode. There's this broad sense that infinite freedom brings with it a sense of nihilism, and how the internet age is readily bringing that about. It's also sort of like the themes of DIY in that sense, do it yourself. And it's basically about how we're addicted to our phones, and it's sucking away our attention spans, but it doesn't sound too boomerish about it. I like that, because I share those opinions, so glad to see someone who isn't a boomer, talking about it, right? Yada yada. Closed Road, I said, wow, this album turned around fast, so I liked that song. And then I guess the last song that I am going to be going into in depth is Finally, because this was my favorite song of the Foolish Man album, which is basically because Finally is about how I've been depressed all this time, life has been shit, but I'm keeping my demons at bay now. It's just such an upbeat song. It has very similar vibes to Fine by Lemon Demon in that way, because Fine was this song that could either be read as upbeat or sarcastic. Its meaning depended entirely on how sincere you felt the singer was being. But to a lot of people, and myself included, it came off as a song that is like, everything about life is shit, but it's fine to me. This way of adjusting your view of it, even though the original intention of the song was probably to be sarcastic. Because, it's about, we'll take all the sunshine, never give it back, even if there's a heat wave or terrorist attack, it'll just be a close shave. That song's fucking amazing. And this is a similarly upbeat sounding song, but as opposed to having this idea that it can be read sarcastically, this one is just the shit has, life isn't shit anymore. I can finally be upbeat and breathe, and things were okay this whole time. I can just adjust my frame of view. That's what I got out of it, at the very least. That happiness comes not necessarily from life just magically getting better, but from you changing your thoughts about life, changing your metacognition. And that's something that you need to keep in mind, especially since I was in kind of a shit mood before listening to both of these albums. So hearing that at the specific time that I did, it was kind of a right place, right time thing. So, Pillow Armor, why are they speaking Spanish now? They're sampling some Brazilian song, and Foolish Man is literally just the same lyric every time for like a minute and a half. Yeah, that's about everything I have to say. So to wrap things up, in regards to these two albums, I think I prefer the first one slightly more. I think I'd both give them a light 7, just because it's sort of a coin flip as to whether or not I think the songs are playlist worthy, whereas other songs, or rather other albums, I like their sound more, or I think they're more consistently catchy. I like this the first album a little bit more just because of its sound, whereas the second one can sound, a little too processed at times, like I said, a little too full, whereas I think the lightness of the first album was part of the appeal of its sound, which I do like, particularly on the first album. That's about it. Jojo, you don't have the worst music take. music tastes. I've been flubbing my words constantly throughout this recording, but you know what? We're rolling with it. That's about it. See ya.